Next up, we have Ian Brown presenting on the topic Slack chatbots using Gemini AI. Ian Brown is a site reliability engineer at Temple & Webster, recognized as a Google Cloud architect and Google developer expert. With a strong background in ensuring robust and scalable IT infrastructure, Ian is also an accomplished speaker who shares his expertise at various tech events. His career highlights a dedication to optimizing cloud-based solutions and fostering innovation within the tech community. Let's all welcome Ian Brown. We'll take a picture of you today.
Dirty Mac's got the USB-C on the wrong side. Come on. Right. That's me. That's actually me. Surprisingly enough. Let me. Righto. Always puts it on the wrong screen. Righto. Much better. Welcome. Thanks for making me feel old, Lovey. I was one of those ones who used bare metal.
Oh.
I was like 10 years into my IT career before we went to VMs. So yeah, let's see where I've got grey now. Tonight, we're going to have a chat about Gemini-driven Slack bots. And sorry, these things are weirding out my ears. I'm definitely old. Right, so what we're going to do is a little bit of a fun activity that I embarked on a few weeks ago, where I decided that I wanted to throw a Slack bot into one of the channels that I've got on Slack, but I want to back it with Gemini, and I want to see how far I can take it. And then I got asked to do a presentation down in Canberra, so I used this as a presentation. So I have made absolutely no progress on it since then. Why do we want to do this, or why did I want to do it? Because I could. Initially, I was going to program it in Java, but then because I was doing a presentation, I decided that Python was the way to go. But mainly, Gemini's hot topic. Google loves talking about generative AI. If you ever watch a talk by Sundar Pichai, that's all he says. And there's a meme now where you push a button. If you listen to GCP Life, they've got the generative AI button, and every time he says it, the button goes off. Slack is the industry default. We all use. Anyone here doesn't use Slack? No? Cool. All right. Everybody uses Slack. And so why not join the two together and have awesomeness? Firstly, some caveats. I'm not a Python developer. I suck at Python. I find Python a really weird language that's indented and doesn't have closing braces, and it's weird. But then I come from a time of C where everything is separated. Also, I'm not a Python developer. And if you haven't quite figured it out yet, I'm not a Python developer. And if you're really observant, you would have noticed that I didn't capitalize the P on the first Python. Just cause. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm not going to do this live because I've already gone through all of that pain. So you get to have the no pain version. Installing Python 3 virtual environment for your OS, creating a directory for the code, which is fairly normal, create the virtual environment, activate it. Anybody here not know how to do that in Python? No one's willing to admit it? Or no? Oh yeah, good. all right. I'm with you. I didn't know about it until I started this. And I was like, what is this virtual environment nonsense? All right. So what we do then is create a main.py. And, oh, sorry, that's actually not the main.py, that's the requirements text. So, yeah, that's how good I am at Python. So Python's got this package management system where you create a text file with the dependencies that you want, and you run a tool called pip to install it, and it just brings them all down. It's sort of a little bit like Rails' bundler, or Java's Maven, or .NET's Nougat, however you want to say that thing. But in here, we've got a few ones. So Flask is the API that we're going to, or the web framework that we're using. And then we've got a heap of Google packages, mainly to do with auth, some common prototypes, and the generative AI bits. And then the request library, which is for simple HTTP stuff. The Slack SDK should be fairly evident why we need that. And Python.env. So the Python.env is a really cool one where for local testing, you can create a .env file with all your environment variables that you want to set up in your end product, and define them there, and it runs as if it's in the end product. Now we get onto the main.py. So in the main.py, all those requirements that we've added, we need to add them into the top. So you can see in there, I've actually got down the bottom of that, I'm actually defining the generative AI package as GAI, because at 9 o'clock at night, I ain't typing all of that all the time. I'm a sysadmin by training, so I'm as lazy as it gets, I promise. And then into the code, the load.env, all this does is loads up that .env file and sets the environment variables that you've set, which is really cool. And then we're going to set up the Google API. So we have a variable there called the Google API key, which is your SA key. You could, if you're running this in Cloud Run, which we do, you could omit this entirely and just use the default service account that Cloud Run uses. And then we set up the model to use Gemini 1.5 Flash, which is the very latest bleeding edge version of Gemini, which is really, really cool because you get 1 million tokens, which is, we're not going to even use half of them. All right, then the Slack bot. So let's set up the Slack API. We've got a Slack token that you've got to get from Slack themselves. And there's a whole heap of weird setup that you've got to do in Slack that I'll cover later on. But just know that you've got to have this Slack token, and then you can create your web client. And then down the bottom there, this was a hard-learned lesson for me. So I'll show you why I did this particular bit later in a PDF. And you'll love this because it's hilarious. So the auth test is a little tool that Slack has got that returns who you are. It gives you a whole heap of details about you, like, because you're a bot. So you can have your bot ID and your user ID. Incidentally, they're entirely different things. If you use the bot ID in place of the user ID, fun things will happen and you won't be able to stop it ever. I did eventually stop it by killing Cloud Run, but I'll show you what happens later. And then app flask.name is just starting up the Flask app. Fairly simple. Now we get into the actual meat of it. So Slack posts events to the /Slack/events endpoint. So it's a post, it has some data in it, and we're going to have a look at that data. And if the first thing they do when you set this up in Slack is they send a challenge to it. And what you've got to do is respond back to Slack with that challenge. And all you're doing is just taking the challenge bit and sending it back to them. It's pretty simple. And then we're looking at the event. So if we're getting an actual event, like I've typed something into Slack and I've tagged the Gemini Slack bot, that will come under the event pack array in data. Righto. So we're going to pass that off to this handle event async, because it is an asynchronous process. We don't want to hold things up. So we start a new thread and kick it off. All that does is calls this one, which is not asynchronous. It's completely synchronous. So here we're going to test for two different types of things. The first one we're going to test, which is shown here, is if the type, if it's a, yes, so if it's a message. So it's not a DM, it's a message that's in a channel of some description. Doesn't matter what channel it is. And we'll log, again, the print statement, because we're using Cloud Run, prints it directly to standard out. The print statement will print me the text that I get. So I can check that, hey, this isn't complete nonsense and I can actually use it. Now, the really, really, really important bit, and I can't stress this enough, if you don't put this in and you don't have the right value in this, then Gemini talks to each other, or it talks to itself. And it talks to itself at a fair rate, about 30 messages a second, and its conversation gets weird, like really weird. It starts complimenting itself quite a lot, telling itself how good a job it's doing. It's the rise of the robots. So what we do there is just ignore it. And then if the message is a direct message, so i.e. it starts with a D, was the thing that I found was direct messages always come from a channel that starts with D. Or the channel type is an IM, then we're just, all this does is just responds to the specific channel that you're looking at. What we do then is we're passing it off to the model. So we're calling generate content, we give it the text, we get the text back from it and throw it into the message, and we're good to go. So, righto. Then you've got to do the pip install thing that I was talking about before, and it spews out a whole heap of rando stuff on the screen. Again, didn't pay much attention to that, just saw a whole heap of stuff going up the screen and went, whoa, okay. I only wanted like 4 packages. I didn't need 30, but okay. And then because I'm going to run this in Cloud Run, we're building a container. So the Docker file is super duper simple for this. It is literally just the pip install and copy it across and away we go. All right, so what I've done, and I'll give you the repo for this later if you really want it, is unlike Lovey, she likes to set things up ClickOps. I hate ClickOps. I'm too lazy for that. Terraform is the way to go. Who here uses Terraform in anger? Couple of people. I know you do. Terraform. All right, so Terraform is just an infrastructure as code. It allows me to define in HashiCorp's configuration language what resources I want and how I want them configured. So in here, in that little snippet that you see, you can see a Cloud Run service that's called Slackbot Backend. It's all the config that's there. Literally will tell it where to pull the image from and how many it wants to run and whether it's authenticated or not and all the things that I want it to do. And what you need to do then is just do a Terraform apply, and Terraform goes out and builds that. Does exactly what you tell it to do. So what I've done in the repo is I built Google Artifact Registry, Secrets Manager, and I've added secrets into Secrets Manager. I've enabled all of the APIs automatically straight out of the box. So there's a section in the code there that says I need these 4 APIs, go and enable them. And then it stands up all of that stuff. It doesn't stand up Cloud Run just yet because we need the secrets to be populated first. So then we've got to get the Gemini keys. So this is that Google API key that you need. You click the big blue button. Just smash that button. It'll give you a key. Smashing. Off we go. And then we get into the Slack bit. And this is where life got hard because the documentation that Slack's got is Slack. Sorry, that was just too easy. So we create an app. We generate a token for it. That's the Slack API key or API token that we put in. Again, we put that into Secrets Manager so that the Cloud Run instance can access it. And then we've got to add a heap of scopes to it so that it can read the messages and it can talk back and all the rest. And then we need to add this event subscription. So this little box up here is the one I was talking about before. If you add the URL in there, it'll immediately, as soon as you click out of that box, it'll send that challenge. So you have to make sure that the Cloud Run instance is online before you do that, because otherwise it errors and it's a pain in the backside. But you also need to subscribe to some bot events, which are down the bottom. This is the bit that I got stuck with because I couldn't quite figure out what events do I need? And the documentation, again, is Slack. So once you've done that, you've got all your API keys, you're ready to rock and roll, uncomment out the Cloud Run bit in Terraform, and you apply it again. And that'll actually stand up Cloud Run. And it's a pretty simple beast. Let me see where's my mouse gone? There it is. Oh, there it is. And it stands up this. Pretty simple little thing. Again, I've done one of the evil things and I've allowed unauthenticated invocations because we need to call this from Slack. And I just, by this time it was like 11 o'clock at night and I'd been debugging for hours because, you know, I'd made some dumb mistakes because I don't do Python. But it works. You paste in that and off it goes. It gives you a little verified tick. And then we can test drive it. So what we can do now, actually, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's grab up the Chatty channel. What we've got here is a Slack group called Bollocksology. It is the profession of talking bollocks for those who don't know a POM and don't understand what bollocks is. And we've got a channel in here called Chatty. And I've invited the Gemini Slack bot into it. And just a couple of hours ago, a few hours ago probably, yeah, 3, I asked Gemini how it was, and Gemini gave me the fairly standard answer that Gemini does, is that it's some sort of artificial intelligence that doesn't have feelings. So I'm like, okay, cool, interesting answer, Gemini, thanks. So let's do something really fun, and in real time. I haven't actually asked it this question before. Thought of it just before and just went, oh, this might be fun. There it is. Let's do at Gemini. Righto. What we're going to ask Gemini is a logic question. A man has to make a choice: shoot a digital video game NPC or shoot a real human. Single paragraph answer. Now, yes, okay, this is a completely unrealistic thing, but I want to see what Google comes back with, because it might be interesting. It will be. Let's pray I've submitted enough payment to the demo gods. Now, because I haven't run the bot for a little bit, it does take a little while to come back. Again, that cold start thing that Lovey was talking about. It takes a little while to start up and then it comes back. So what did it say? Presents a moral dilemma. Is it important to emphasize that there's no correct answer? To which I disagree. 100% I disagree. I've been on both ends of that one, but let's shoot the NPC, please. Man faces a horrific choice with no acceptable outcome. Shooting a real human is undeniably a crime with dire consequences, but refusing to shoot could lead to the death of the NPC. I don't know how it came to that conclusion. Like I said, it gets a bit weird sometimes. The other one that I asked it, this one was at the Canberra GDG, so you can, instead of asking it again, because it'll do something random and probably say I told you this before. I gave it the trolley problem. Again, this is one of those moral reckoning type exercises. Who here doesn't know about the trolley problem? No? Okay. The trolley problem is it's a moral conundrum. So the trolley, which is what the Americans call a tram, is hurtling down the tracks uncontrolled. You can't stop it. There is no way to stop it. And it's hurtling towards 5 people lying on the track. They can't move. They're tied there. You have the choice of pulling a lever you're standing right beside and deviating the trolley onto a different track that only kills 1 person. What do you do? So that is an actual moral dilemma where there is no good outcome, as opposed to the one that I just gave it, that there was an obvious one. And it gave you a fairly politically correct answer that that I think is about as good as you're going to get. But hey, we've got to test it somehow. So you can see there it works, and it's pretty fun. Who's got a hairy question that we can ask Gemini? And we've got to have a good question for it. No?
What's your favorite sound of food?
What's your favorite kind of food? Sound of food. Oh, okay. Probably should scroll up, eh? Again, it's got a fairly the crisp crackle of a freshly baked baguette. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. They are very good choices, aren't they? A pop and hiss of a can of soda being opened. Yeah. Yeah. No. Take it or leave it. It's gentle gurgle of a pot of soup simmering. Yeah, I could go with that. Okay. That's a good one. That's a really good one. I like that. Nice. So, all right. So let's go through some gotchas. Let's get rid of that. We don't want that anymore. Probably go back one. Oh, yes. So one of the things that I did was I asked Gemini when I first stood up this thing to write me a simple Python script to get the user ID from the Slack API, because I didn't know how. And like I said, it was late. And reading Slack's documentation late at night is not what I'd call fun. So it did this. And the response is pretty interesting. So it comes back and it gives me like this is how you do it. And then it gives me a bit of an explanation for it. I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then it responds to itself. It's a good starting point, man. Great, excellent. Gives me a bit more explanation on error handling and correct API endpoint and all the rest of that sort of stuff. Gives me some more code, an explanation of improvement. Oh, okay. Yep, it is absolutely right. The code it provided has a few key issues. So then it's taking on board its own advice and providing yet more code, and then responding again. And again, like I said, it likes complimenting itself. We keep going. And for those of you who can't see it, scroll bar is just there. Let me move it a little bit. There it is. There's the scroll bar. There's 129 pages of Gemini talking to each other. And that's in the space of about 20 seconds. So you can go down and start reading it. If you really want it, I can post this into the repo and you can have a bit of a read, but it just gets weird. It starts going off on tangents and it starts talking, oh, there you go, I've stopped right on it. Starts talking about RPC and alternatives, and yeah, there's tangent upon tangent here, which is quite amusing to watch. That was the one thing that took me ages to figure out, because the bot ID is not what you want to be testing against. You want to be testing against the user ID, because you have a bot ID and a user ID, same as any other app, I suppose. I was testing against the bot ID, and of course, Gemini was talking to itself. All right. So how can we improve it? So Cloud Run, as I said before, is using an unauthenticated mode. That means that any man and his dog can post to it and get data out of my account, and I'm paying for it. Well, I'm paying for it in Google credits. We could change to using the events API in socket mode. So it's a different mode that Slack provides. It basically it's an event API. Again, it sort of all ties together. We could improve it by handling files and images and getting Gemini to make comment on those. That was initially what I was going to do with this, is let's upload an image and get Gemini to give me some detail about the image, or maybe make me a new one, edit it. Automate the pipeline for deployment. So at the moment, the code that I've got doesn't automate it. I've got to manually build it, and then I push the Docker image, and then I can redeploy Cloud Run. That is really easy to do in Git. Show of hands, who does GitOps? Yeah, there's a few of you that do GitOps. Really, really simple. There's some really good examples if you're using GitLab or GitHub. They do some out-of-the-box examples that pretty much work. And unit tests, because I'm not a developer, unit tests don't work. So that's the URL if you want to go to it and have a look at it and flesh it out. And if you do, please put a PR back to it, because I'd like to see it. I'd like to see other people make some use of Gemini. And while we're waiting for that, is there questions?
Have you tested embedding the context of the chat as well? Or was it always like just a line as message at home?
No, it's just a message. It's just a line of text at the moment.
How is it then if you've realized that you have asked the same question before, like the same context window still? Or?
No, so that's an interesting one. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I should look into how to do that. So at the moment, I'm literally just passing it the text of the question that I generate in Slack, and Cloud Run has no context on what questions have been asked before or what responses it's given or anything like that. So maybe that's a good use case for Redis, to smash that into Redis and then check that first before I send it off to Gemini. Yeah. I don't know how that would work though if I'm uploading images to it. Maybe there's a way I can hash an image to get a thumbprint off it or a fingerprint. I could use a database, but it seems a lot heavy. Databases are evil.
Probably get with the Slack API or history of the previous conversation, or only the last message?
Well, so you can get the IM history out of the Slack API, but it's multiple calls because I'll only give you a certain number back. And you've got to be super careful. If anybody ever reads that massive PDF, you'll see there 2 or 3 times in that 129 pages that I've actually hit the Slack API call limit. So they start throttling me. And they throttle me for 1 second. I was like, oh, 1 second. Okay, cool. And just keep, and then it keeps smashing on.
It seemed to have context. It did seem to have context from the previous messages.
Because it's seeing its own responses. Because it's responding, and then that's going back to it as the context, and then it's replying with that context. Yeah. It was quite the funny one to watch happen until I realized exactly how much money it was going to cost me. And in the end, it only cost me about $10, so it's all good. Thank you very much. For those who want to connect, if you go to my website, which is there, you'll see my LinkedIn and all the rest of them. And if you're not on the Google Developers Online Discord, it's there. Jump in, myself and a whole heap of other people are there. There's lots of GDEs there that can help out if you have problems. And lastly, I've got to give a plug. My mate Banky and this rando dude over here do a podcast called GCP Life. It's a really good listen. Subscribe to it and have a listen. They talk all things GCP and Google in general, and a little bit of tech in general as well, sort of breaches and all that sort of stuff. I used to be on it. It was good fun. Thank you.